John had never been to a planet like this before. His boots crunched softly on the alien ground, and the air felt thick, almost heavy. He had followed the distress signal for days, a signal that led him to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. The signal had come from a small, uncharted planet, one that didn't appear on any maps. But now, as he stood in the middle of an unfamiliar jungle, he felt uneasy. There was something strange about this place, something that made him question if he should have come here at all. The thick trees around him were unlike anything he had ever seen, their bark shining with a faint glow under the pale light of the 2 moons overhead. The plants seemed to hum softly, almost as if they were alive. Every step he took was met with resistance as the thick foliage tried to close in behind him, making it feel as though the jungle itself was watching him. He brushed the back of his neck, a sense of unease creeping up his spine. Choice. The distress signal was too important to ignore. After hours of trekking through the jungle, John stumbled upon something unexpected. The clearing ahead, something moved, something human-shaped. He approached cautiously, his hand instinctively reaching for the blaster at his hip. It was a woman, but not like any woman he had ever seen. Her skin was pale, almost white, and it shimmered under the moonlight, giving off a faint, ethereal glow. Her hair was long, flowing in silver, hanging loosely around her shoulders like a waterfall of moonlight. She looked weak, leaning against a tree, her body trembling. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and her eyes were closed, as if she was either resting or unconscious. As John approached her, his heart raced. He had never seen anyone like this before. He crouched down carefully, trying not to alarm her. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, reaching out a hand to gently shake her shoulder. The woman's eyes snapped open in an instant, her gaze sharp and alert, as if she had been waiting for him. Her eyes were a deep shade of violet, almost glowing in the dim light, and they locked onto his with an intensity that made him freeze. "Don't touch me," she whispered hoarsely, her voice shaky but firm. There was something in her tone that made him pause. She wasn't just warning him, she was begging him. John pulled his hand back quickly, confused. "I'm just trying to help," he said, his voice full of concern. "You're hurt. Let me help you." She shook her head sharply, her silver hair moving with the force of it. "You don't understand," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "My touch, ... it's dangerous." John felt a cold shiver run down his spine at her words. He had never encountered anyone who would say something like that. But before he could ask more, the woman's body shuddered, and she stumbled slightly. Her skin seemed to pulse, almost as if something inside her was growing stronger. "Please," she said again, this time her voice filled with desperation. "Stay away from me." But it was too late. Without thinking, John reached out to steady her as she swayed dangerously. His hand brushed against her arm, and the moment their skin made contact, something extraordinary happened. A burst of heat surged through him. It wasn't just warmth, it was intense, burning heat like standing too close to a fire. He gasped in shock, pulling his hand back, but it was too late. The heat seemed to spread, and his skin felt like it was on fire. "What the hell?" John cried out, backing away from her in shock. He looked at his hand, which was red and stinging, but the pain didn't last long. The heat seemed to fade, as quickly as it had come, but there was a lingering feeling of something powerful still inside him. The woman was now standing upright, body trembling, her hands raised in a defensive posture. "I warned you," she said, her voice strained with both fear and anger. "My touch is ... dangerous. I absorb energy from everything I come into contact with, and when it's a human..." She paused, her eyes flickering to his hand. "Energy is ... unpredictable." Now John felt his heart pounding in his chest, trying to process what she was saying. "What do you mean? Why does it hurt?" The woman closed her eyes, her face twisted in a mix of pain and regret. "It's because my race. The Vitharians, we absorb energy from the world around us. The plants, the air, the sun. We don't usually interact with humans. Your energy, your ... life force, something we've never encountered before. And when I touched you, ... it was too much. It's dangerous." "Then why didn't you warn me sooner?" John demanded, still feeling the after effects of her touch. did," she replied softly, "but you didn't listen." There was a long pause between them, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. John looked at her closely, trying to understand what was happening. The pain in his hand had dulled, but it was replaced by a strange sense of power, almost like an energy was coursing through his veins. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice low and apologetic. "I just... I don't know how. To stop it? I've been stranded here for so long. I was hoping to find a way off this planet." John's curiosity took over. "Where are you from? How did you get here?" The woman hesitated. But then she looked up at him. Her violet eyes filled with a strange mixture of sadness and determination. "I am Lyra," she said softly. "I was on a ship from my world. We were attacked, and my ship crashed here on this planet. I've been stranded here for years." John could feel her pain, the weight of her loneliness and fear. Despite the strange and intense encounter, he couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. She wasn't just some alien he had found. She was someone who had been through unimaginable hardship. And for some reason, he felt a strange bond with her. "I'll help you," John said finally, stepping closer. "We'll find a way off this planet." But as he reached out again to offer her his hand, Lyra's warning echoed in his. "Mind, don't touch me." And he couldn't help but wonder just how dangerous this connection really was. John stepped back, trying to clear his head. The heat from Lyra's touch still lingered in his skin. It wasn't just physical. It was a strange sensation, almost like her touch had opened something inside of him, something that felt powerful, but dangerous. His heart still raced, and the air around him seemed to vibrate with a faint energy. It's like the planet itself was reacting to what had just happened. Lyra, for her part, had closed her eyes and was now standing motionless, her silver hair flowing gently in the breeze. She seemed almost lost in thought, her hands trembling slightly as if she was trying to control something inside her. Her skin, still glowing faintly under the moonlight, began to pulse softly like a heartbeat. John noticed that the intensity of her glow increased every time they spoke, like her emotions were directly tied to the energy she absorbed. "I told you." Lyra's voice was soft, but there was a tinge of panic behind it. "You can't touch me, you don't know what it's like." "I can't control it." She paused, her hands moving slightly as if she was trying to calm herself. "When I touched you, I didn't just feel your energy. I felt everything. Your emotions, your life force, your thoughts. And it almost consumed me." John rubbed his arms, feeling the heat of the encounter still radiating inside him. I didn't mean to. I didn't know what was going to happen," he said, his voice thick with confusion. "What are you? What is this power inside you?" Lyra opened her eyes and looked at him, her violet gaze piercing through him. "I am a Vitharian," she said quietly. "My people can absorb energy from everything around us, plants, air, even the stars. But with humans... It's different. Our energy reacts to yours in unpredictable ways." John was about to ask more questions when Lyra suddenly staggered, her knees buckling beneath her. Her face twisted in pain and she gasped for breath, as if she were struggling against some invisible force. "It's getting worse," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I can feel the energy building up inside me. If I don't control it soon, it will explode." John rushed forward, grabbing her arm to steady her. His touch was gentle, but it only made things worse. The moment his hand made contact with her arm, he felt a sharp jolt of heat shoot through his own body, as if the energy inside her had surged outward. He pulled his hand back quickly, alarmed. Lyra's eyes were wide, and her face turned pale. "No, don't touch me," she gasped. "It makes it worse. Can't stop it when it gets like this." He stepped back, unsure of what to do. He could see the distress in her eyes, and it made his chest tighten with worry. "I didn't mean to." "I know," Lyra interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this power, it's getting harder to control. I've been stuck on this planet for so long and the energy inside me has only grown stronger. It was fine at first, but now... She trailed off, shaking her head. "I don't know how much longer I can keep it in check." John felt helpless. There was nothing he could do to help her, and the situation was getting more dangerous by the second. He could feel her energy pulsing through the air, the heat rising around her, making it difficult to breathe. It was as if she were becoming a living source of pure energy, her body barely able to contain the power she was absorbing. "I'm sorry," John said, his voice full of regret. "I never should have." Lyra shook her head again, this time with more force. "It's not your fault. I'm the one who warned you. I've been alone for so long, trying to hide my power from everyone I meet. But you, ... you're different. I don't know why, but I feel a strange connection with you." John looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean? How can I be different?" "I'm just a human." Her violet eyes softened, and she took a shaky breath. "I don't know," she said slowly. "But when you touched me, ... it felt different than when I've touched others. I don't know why it's like this. I've never met anyone who... I've never been able to absorb energy like this before. The last time I felt anything like this was when I was in contact with my people. Back home?" John frowned. "Gear? People? Where are they now?" "They're gone," Lyra replied, her voice suddenly distant. "My people. We were wiped out in a war, many years ago. Few survivors like me were scattered across the galaxy. I ended up here, alone." There was a long silence as John absorbed her words. He could hear the sadness in her voice, and he couldn't imagine the pain she must have felt being stranded alone on this desolate planet. But there was something more troubling about her story. "So you've been alone all this time, and now you're telling me that this power inside you is getting out of control?" Lyra nodded grimly. "Yes, I've tried to keep it in check, to survive, but every day it grows stronger. And when you touched me, it became even harder to control. I can feel it pushing at the edges of my body, threatening to break free." John felt a deep sense of sympathy for her. He had always been a man of action, quick to solve problems and protect those in need. But this situation was unlike anything he had ever faced. He couldn't just walk away from her, couldn't leave her here alone to deal with something so dangerous, even if it meant putting himself at risk. "We have to find a way to help you," John said, determination filling his voice. "You can't be alone with this. I won't leave you here to deal with this by yourself." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. "You really would stay?" she asked, almost as if she didn't believe it. John nodded, his jaw set with resolve. "I won't leave you to face this alone. I don't know how, but we'll find a way to help you control it." For the first time since they had met, Lyra's lips curved into a small, faint smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make John feel like they might just have a chance. Together, they would figure this out. But as Lyra took a slow breath, the ground beneath them trembled slightly, and John couldn't shake the feeling that whatever they were facing was much bigger than either of them had imagined. As the days passed, John and Lyra worked together, trying to find a way to control the growing power inside her. It was clear that Lyra's abilities were unlike anything John had ever encountered. He had been on countless missions, met different species, and faced many dangers, but none of them had ever been like this. There was something unique about Lyra's strength and power that felt almost ancient. And yet it was still fragile, like a storm waiting to break free. Each day, Lyra's control over her abilities grew weaker. The pulses of energy radiating from her skin became more intense, and she had to struggle to keep them in check. John did his best to help, but nothing he tried seemed to work. The more time they spent together, the more it became clear that this wasn't just about controlling energy. It was about something deeper, something tied to her very being. One evening, as they sat by a small campfire, John couldn't help but stare at Lyra. The faint glow of her skin cast strange shadows across her face, making her seem almost otherworldly. She was still trying to master her powers, her hands trembling as she focused all her energy on keeping the heat from surging out of control. Her breath was shallow, and her eyes were dark with worry. "You're pushing yourself too hard," John said quietly, watching her struggle. "Maybe we should take a break." Lyra shook her head, her silver hair falling over her shoulders. "I can't stop now," she replied, her voice strained. "The longer I wait, the worse it gets, if I don't learn how to control it soon. I could hurt someone, or worse. ... I could destroy everything around me." John sighed, his gaze softening as he watched her. He could see the weight of her words in her eyes. This wasn't just about survival. It was about more than that. She had been running from her own power for so long, and now it was catching up with her. He had never met anyone who had been through so much, and it made him realize just how much she had suffered. "Lyra, listen to me," John said, his voice gentle. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together. We just need time. We can't rush it. If you push yourself too hard, you're just going to make it worse." Looked at him, her violet eyes filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. For a moment, they simply sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. John could feel the heat radiating from her, but it was more controlled now, more manageable. It wasn't the searing burn he had felt when they first touched. It was softer, more like the warmth of the sun on his skin. But still, it was something he could sense, a presence in the air that wasn't entirely natural. "I've never been able to control it like this before," Lyra said, her voice barely above. A whisper. "My people, we had learned to live with it, but I was still young when it happened. I never got the chance to fully understand it." John raised an eyebrow. "What happened to your people?" Lyra's gaze grew distant, and she looked down. At the fire, as if lost in a memory. "My people were powerful. We were capable of harnessing energy in ways other species could only dream of. We could communicate with the elements, bend them to our will. But we were also feared. The war destroyed everything. The people were hunted down one by one until there were only a few of us left. I'm one of the last of my kind." John felt a pang of sympathy for her. He had known loss, but he had never lost everything: his home, his people, his entire way of life. He couldn't imagine what it would be like to carry such a heavy burden. "And you've been here alone, all this time?" John asked, his voice softening. Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, alone. And now, with this power inside me, I don't know if I can ever be free of it. Every day it gets stronger, and I'm afraid I'll lose control completely." The silence between them grew heavy, and John could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. But then something changed. He noticed a faint shimmer in the air around Lyra, a pulse of energy that rippled through the space between them. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, something shifting, something alive. It was like the very air had become charged with energy. "Lyra," he asked, his voice laced with concern. "What's happening?" Her eyes widened, and she looked at him, a look of fear in her eyes. "It's happening again," she said quickly. "The energy is getting out of control. I can't stop it." Before John could react, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Air grew thick with heat, and he could feel the temperature rising rapidly. It wasn't just Lyra's body that was glowing now. The entire space around them seemed to be affected. The trees and plants in the jungle trembled, and the ground cracked open with a deep rumble. A blinding light erupted from Lyra's chest, and John instinctively shielded his eyes from the intense glow. "Lyra, stop," he shouted, his voice rising over the noise. But she didn't seem to hear him. She was too focused, her hands outstretched, as if trying to push the energy back into her body. The heat continued to build, and John could feel his own body beginning to sweat. The air was thick with energy, and it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Body trembled with the force of the power surging through her skin glowing brighter with every passing second. John could feel the ground shaking. Beneath his feet, the jungle around them starting to warp, as if the energy itself was warping reality. He reached out to her, but this time he was careful. He didn't touch her directly. Instead, he placed his hand near her shoulder, trying to offer comfort without triggering another wave of energy. "Lyra, please, you have to calm down. You can do this." Lyra's eyes flickered toward him, and for the first time, she seemed to see him. There was a moment of connection, a silent understanding between them, before she finally closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The glowing light around her began to fade, and the air grew less oppressive. It wasn't over. But they had made it through this wave. John let out a sigh of relief, his body still shaking from the intense heat and energy. He knew this wasn't the end of it. Lyra's powers were growing stronger, and they would have to find a way to control them before something far worse happened. As the jungle settled into stillness again, Lyra turned to him, her face pale and exhausted. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice full of regret. "I didn't mean for that to happen." John smiled gently. "It's okay. We'll figure this out. Together." But as he said those words, John knew deep down that the real challenge was just beginning. The power. Inside, Lyra was growing stronger, and soon they would face an even greater test. The days that followed were tense. The jungle around John and Lyra had grown quieter, as though it too felt the pressure building in the air. They had found a small clearing, a safe place to set up camp, but the unease never fully left them. Lyra's powers were unpredictable, and the more she tried to control them, the harder it became. Every time she calmed herself, the energy within her seemed to stir again, like a restless beast waiting to break free. John watched her closely, his concern growing with each passing day. The woman he had met, so full of mystery and power, was slowly becoming someone he couldn't understand. She was no longer just an alien, stranded on a distant planet. She was someone he was starting to care for, someone whose struggles were becoming his own. But he knew the danger. If her power remained unchecked, it could destroy everything they had worked for. One evening, as they sat together near the campfire, John noticed something strange. The air had shifted again, the once calm atmosphere now filled with attention. He couldn't explain. The light from the fire flickered strangely, and the jungle felt wrong. He stood up, scanning the shadows around them. The leaves rustled as if something was moving through the trees. There was no wind to explain it. "Lyra," he said quietly, his voice filled with warning. "I think we're being watched." Lyra's eyes widened, and she immediately stood, her body tense. "No, she whispered, her voice shaky with fear. "They found me." John didn't need to ask who they were. He knew. It could only be the Aldrins. The Aldrins were a ruthless race, one of the most feared across the galaxy. They were known for their brutal nature, their advanced technology, and their obsession with hunting down powerful beings like Lyra. Their entire culture was built on capturing and controlling the powerful species of the universe. And a Vitharian like Lyra was their ultimate prize. For years they had been tracking her, and now it seemed they had finally caught up. "We need to leave," John said, his voice urgent. Now, but Lyra didn't move. She stood frozen in place, her eyes scanning the darkening jungle around. "Them they won't stop until they have me," she said, her voice trembling. "I can feel them. They're close." John turned and scanned the area, his hand instinctively reaching for his blaster. The forest around them was dense, and the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. He could hear the sound of something heavy moving through the trees, and it wasn't the usual noise of wildlife. This was something different, something dangerous. "I won't let them take you," John said firmly. He had no idea how they would fight back against the Aldrins, but he wasn't about to let them capture Lyra, not while she was still fighting to control her powers. The tension in the air grew, thick as the jungle seemed to close in around them. Then, out of the shadows they appeared, the Aldrins. They were massive, their bodies armored in dark, sleek plating that gleamed under the light of the moons. They had 4 arms, each one ending in sharp, deadly claws. Their eyes glowed deep red, and their faces were twisted in a permanent sneer. They moved in perfect unison, like a well-oiled machine, each step calculated and precise. John felt a rush of adrenaline as the Aldrins closed in. There were at least a dozen of them, and they were surrounding the camp, cutting off any escape. His hand tightened around his blaster, but he knew it wouldn't be enough, not against them. He had seen enough battles to know that sheer force wouldn't win this fight. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. "Lyra, listen to me," John said, his voice low but urgent. "I'll buy us some time. You need to get away now." Lyra's eyes flickered to him, her expression filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "I can't leave you," she said quietly. "You're risking your life for me." John grabbed her by the shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. "We don't have a choice. I'll kill us both if we stay here. I need you to trust me. Go now." For a moment, Lyra hesitated, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But then, as if realizing the truth of his words, she nodded slowly. "I'll find a way to fight them," she said, her voice steadying with the determination he had seen before. "But you need to hold them off long enough for me to escape." John gave her a final nod. "Stay alive. That's all that matters." With that, she turned and bolted into the trees, her body moving with speed and grace as she disappeared into the jungle. John watched her go for a moment before he turned back to face the approaching Yaldrins. They were getting closer, and the air around him was thick with danger. John's hand tightened around the blaster as he prepared for the worst. He didn't know how long he could hold them off, but he wasn't about to let them take Lyra. Not now, not ever. The first Yaldrin lunged at him, its claws outstretched, but John was ready. Fired his blaster in one smooth motion, hitting the creature square in the chest. The Yaldrin roared in pain, but it didn't stop. The others advanced quickly, their movements coordinated and deadly. John dodged the next strike, barely managing to roll out of the way as another Yaldrin swung its massive claws at him. He fired again, hitting the creature's arm, but it barely slowed down. He was outnumbered, and his options were running out. But then, just as he thought all hope was lost, he heard Illyra's voice, calling out from the trees. The ground shook beneath him as a massive surge of energy shot into the sky, lighting up the entire jungle. John turned, just in time to see Lyra standing at the edge of the clearing, her body glowing with an intense, fiery light. Her powers were no longer contained. She had let them go. The Yaldrins hesitated, their eyes flickering with confusion and fear. Lyra was no longer the fragile woman they had been hunting. She was something more, something beyond their understanding. "Want me?" Lyra called out, her voice full of defiance. "Come and take me." The Yaldrins hesitated, unsure of how to respond to the raw power Lyra was now radiating. John watched, his heart pounding, as Lyra stood tall, her powers blazing around her. Like a storm, she was no longer running from her abilities. She was embracing them. And for the first time, John realized that she might just be their only hope. The energy in the air was thick, almost tangible. John stood still, watching in awe as Lyra unleashed the full extent of her power. It was both beautiful and terrifying. Her body glowed with an intensity he had never seen before. The light around her seemed to pulse with every breath, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. The ground beneath them trembled, and the trees around them shook, as if caught in a powerful wind. But there was no breeze, only the raw force of Lyra's energy. The Yaldrins, who had moments ago been advancing with calculated precision, now hesitated, their glowing red eyes fixed on Lyra. They had never encountered anything like this before. Their superior technology, their advanced weapons, none of it mattered in the face of the storm she had become. John could see the fear in their eyes, and for the first time, Yaldrins were the ones who were unsure. Lyra stood tall, her hands raised to the sky as if she were drawing power from the very stars above. Her violet eyes shimmered with a fierce determination, and for a moment, John saw a side of her he hadn't fully understood before. She was no longer just a woman trying to control a dangerous gift. She had become something else, something far more powerful. "You think you can take me?" she called out, her voice ringing through the clearing, echoing off the trees. "You think your weapons can stop me?" The Yaldrins growled in unison, their claws scraping against the ground as they prepared to strike. But Lyra's eyes blazed, and in the blink of an eye, she unleashed a blast of energy so powerful that it sent shockwaves through the jungle. The Yaldrins were thrown backward, their bodies slammed into the trees with a force that left deep indentations in the bark. The ground cracked beneath them. The air was filled with a deafening roar as the shockwaves spread out. John ducked instinctively, feeling the heat of the blast even from a distance. The trees around him splintered as if they were nothing more. Then twigs and the ground beneath his feet cracked open. He could hear the Yaldrins' roars of anger and pain as they struggled to regain their footing, but Lyra wasn't finished. She was just getting started. "Stay back," Illyra shouted to John, her voice shaking with both power and fear. I don't know how much longer I can control this. John didn't hesitate. He knew this was their only chance. He rushed toward her, his hand reaching out instinctively to grab her arm, but he stopped just before touching her. The energy around her was too much. He could feel the heat radiating from her body, and he knew that touching her could trigger another surge of uncontrollable power. Lyra, we need to move. He yelled over the chaos, his eyes scanning the jungle for any sign of escape. But Lyra's gaze was locked onto the Yaldrins, who were slowly getting back on their feet, their eyes glowing brighter with rage. They were more determined than ever to capture her. John could see their weapons charging, preparing to fire, but he knew that Lyra's power was the only thing that could stop them now. Lyra, listen to me, he shouted again, his voice filled with urgency. We can't fight them all. We need to get to the ship. You can't keep doing this. But Lyra didn't respond. Her focus was entirely on the Yaldrins, and the energy surrounding her only grew stronger. The Yaldrins were now charging at her, their claws raised and their weapons firing. But it was no use. Lyra was too powerful. With a sharp gesture, she sent another blast of energy out, this time targeting the lead Yaldrin. The creature was thrown backward, its body slamming into the ground with a loud thud. It lay still, not moving. But even as the first Yaldrin fell, more took its place. They were relentless. There were too many of them. John's heart raced as he realized that Lyra's power, while immense, could only hold them off for so long. Lyra, we have to leave, he insisted, his voice desperate. This is too much. You're going to destroy everything. Finally, Lyra turned to him, her face pale and drawn, her body trembling from the effort. I can't stop, she said, her voice breaking. I can feel it, ... the power. It won't stop growing. If I don't control it soon, it will consume me. It will destroy everything around me. John's heart sank as he saw the pain in her eyes. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about something much bigger. Lyra was fighting not only for her life, but for control of something she had never fully understood. We don't have to fight them all. Lyra, John said, his voice soft, but filled with resolve. We can escape. We can find a way off this planet. But Lyra's eyes flickered with doubt. She had been alone for so long, hiding from the world, from her own power. Now that it had been unleashed, she wasn't sure if she could contain it again. Please. Lyra, John said, taking a step closer. I'm here with you. We can do this together. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. Energy around her seemed to calm, just slightly, enough for John to move closer without feeling the heat searing his skin. When she opened her eyes again, there was something different in them. The fear was still there, but so was a newfound determination. You're right, she whispered, her voice barely audible. We can't stay here. With one last, powerful surge of energy, Lyra sent the remaining Yaldrins flying, their bodies crashing into the trees or being knocked unconscious by the sheer force of her power. The jungle was silent again, save for the distant sounds of the crumbling earth around them. John looked at Lyra, his heart still racing. We need to go now. The ship's not far. Can you make it? Lyra nodded, her strength still flickering like a fading light. I can make it, she said, her voice firm, but we need to hurry. With that, they turned and ran. Lyra's power had protected them, but it had come at a cost. The jungle was unstable, and the damage Lyra's powers had caused was starting to show. The ground beneath him continued to shake, and the trees creaked ominously. If they didn't leave soon, the planet would be torn apart. They would be trapped. As they sprinted through the jungle, John glanced back one last time. The Yaldrins were defeated for now, but he knew that their escape was only temporary. They had to get off this planet before it was too late. The planet was dying. It was a truth they could no longer ignore. The ground beneath their feet trembled constantly, and the air was thick with the smell of burning plants and cracked earth. Every time Lyra's power surged, the planet seemed to respond, tearing itself apart just a little more.
How?
Time was running out, and there was no way to stop the destruction. John and Lyra reached the small shuttle they had been using to try to escape the planet. The ship was damaged, its systems barely holding together, but it was the only hope they had left. Lyra, exhausted from the constant battle with her powers, leaned heavily against the side of the shuttle, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Effort it took to control her energy was overwhelming, and it was clear she couldn't keep this up much longer. "We need to go," John said, urgency in his voice as he worked to start the shuttle. The ship's engines sputtered, but eventually hummed to life, the control panel flickering to life with a series of beeps and lights. "We don't have much time. The planet is falling apart, and I don't know if the shuttle can hold together long enough to escape." Lyra nodded but didn't move from where she stood. She looked out across the jungle, her gaze distant. It was clear she was torn, unsure of what to do next. Her power was still a constant presence inside her, pulsing like a storm waiting to break free. She had been struggling with it for so long, and it had already caused so much destruction. She knew she couldn't keep it under control much longer. But she also knew that leaving this planet, leaving behind the only place she had known for years, would be the end of everything she had tried to protect. "I can't leave," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and sadness. "Not until I know the planet is safe. My power is tied to this place. If I leave now, I'm afraid it will destroy everything." John walked over to her, his face softening with understanding. He placed a hand on her shoulder gently, but she flinched slightly. The heat from her skin was still there, though not as intense as before. It was a constant reminder of the power she had inside her. A power she had never fully been able to control. "You don't have to do this alone," John said softly, his voice steady. "You've been carrying this burden for so long. But if you stay, it will destroy you. The planet is already breaking apart. You can't stop it." Alavalda's eyes filled with emotion as she turned to face him. The words she had been holding back for so long finally came out, her voice shaking with the weight of everything she had endured. "I've spent so long hiding," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I've been running from myself. From my power, I thought I could control it, but I can't. If I stay, I'll destroy everything. But if I leave, I'll never be able to make peace with it. I'll always be afraid." John's heart went out to her. He could see the pain in her eyes, the internal struggle that had been eating away at her. He knew she had been running from her past, from the destruction of her people and the weight of the power she had inherited. But he also knew that she couldn't keep running forever. The planet was dying, and so was the person Lyra had been. She had to let go. She had to stop fighting herself. "You don't have to fight anymore," John said softly. "You're not alone. You have a choice. You can choose to live, to move forward. You don't have to let this power destroy you. Let it go, Lyra. Let it go." Lyra looked at him, her eyes searching his face for something, anything that would give her the strength to make the right choice. She could feel the energy inside her building, a storm that threatened to break free at any moment. The fear was still there, but so was something else, a flicker of hope. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. John stepped closer to her, his voice full of conviction. "Yes, you can. You've already come this far. You don't have to control it anymore. Let it go. Trust me, Lyra. You can do this." For a long moment, Lyra stood still, her gaze fixed on the shuttle in front of them. She could feel the power inside her, like an ocean waiting to crash over everything. But then, slowly she closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She had to trust him. She had to trust herself. Most of all, she had to stop running. With a quiet sob, Lyra let go. It wasn't a dramatic release. It wasn't a blinding explosion or a massive surge of energy. It was simply the letting go of the fear, the release of the burden she had carried for so long. She felt the power inside her begin to settle, to calm, until it was nothing more than a soft hum. Quiet presence instead of a raging storm. The air around them seemed to calm as well. The planet's tremors lessened, and the sky overhead began. Too clear, it was as if the world itself was breathing a sigh of relief. For the first time in years, Lyra felt at peace. John looked at her, his face filled with awe. "You did it," he said softly, his voice filled with wonder. Lyra smiled weakly, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had done it. had let go of the fear, the doubt, the pain. But more than that, she had made a choice. She had chosen to live, to move forward, to trust. With a final glance at the planet they were leaving behind, Lyra turned and climbed into the shuttle. John followed her, closing the hatch behind them. The engines roared to life as the shuttle lifted off. Rising into the sky as they left the planet behind, Lyra felt something shift inside her. She was no longer running. She was free. And for the first time in a long time, she felt ready for whatever came next.